Quilty is brought to you by APQS, handcrafted quilting machines. Baby Lock, for the love of sewing. Hovel, when you need to cut it close, choose Hovels. Quiltology, the urban quilt space.
Quilty.
Welcome to Quilty. Today is a Blocks a Go-Go show, which means we focus all our attention on one beautiful quilt block. Today's quilt block is Rolling Stone. Let's roll. Today I'm going to show you how to make a rolling stone block, and it is really a very, very cool sort of optical illusion block. So let's take a look at what we will need for this block. Here's a finished version of the block in this orange and blue. What's really cool about this block is it forms this sort of circle shape, but there's no curved seam in it. It's all just pieces put together, and they form the optical illusion of a circle in the middle, which is very cool. So the pieces that you will need are 2.5-inch strips. This is one block where you're going to make a strip set to begin. So you need 2.5-inch strips of your focus fabric or fabric A, and your contrast or background fabric, fabric B. Okay, so I'm using the orange and the blue for that. You also will need 16 blue fabric B squares, or whatever your contrast fabric is, your background fabric. 16 of those 2.5-inch squares. And then you will also need 4.5-inch squares. You will need 5 of these. They're 4.5 by 4.5, and that forms the center of your rolling stone block, and these corner pieces too. So the first thing you do is cut your strip sets, and I want to talk a little bit about strip sets because they are something that you will see again and again as you do your patchwork. These are the units that we want to get to. We want these units here. We need a lot of these 4.5 by 4.5-inch units, half of the orange fabric and half of the blue. Rather than cutting out all these little rectangles and sewing them all together, it's a lot of work. You don't have to do it that way. With a strip set, you can sew a long, skinny strip of these and then whack them apart, right? Whack them apart. So that's what we're going to do. So the strip set is you take your 2-inch strip of blue, right? And your 2-inch strip of orange, or whatever you're using. Maybe you're using pink and black. You're sewing your right sides together. You flip, because you're always sewing where you're facing the wrong side. Your right sides are together, and you sew a 1/4-inch seam. A really long, skinny piece is going to form from this strip set. I've done one ahead of time. So it's going to look something like this when you're finished. Okay? You've got your long, skinny strip set piece. And when you open it up, yes, it looks like that. So let's take it over to the ironing surface and press it, because we always press our seams whenever we sew anything. We press them to set the seam. And this is a good time to show you that when you have a dark fabric against a light fabric, the rule is to press toward the dark. You open it up toward the dark as opposed to toward the light, because if you do that, then that dark seam behind the fabric is going to show through your light fabric. It doesn't make a lot of a difference if you have a print like we have today, but as a general rule, you press toward the dark so that seam is not going to show through this dark fabric. So you take your strip set over, and then we're going to cut our units. And our pattern will tell us that we need 4.5 by 4.5-inch squares, and I have cut some of those. If you want more information on cutting, just go to some Quilty episodes on cutting. We have one called Cut It Out that's really good. So we get a little something like this. Here's 2 examples, 4.5 by 4.5-inch squares, okay? And that is the first part of this block. The second part of this block is a little something I like to call a square and a square with flippy corners. Well, the flippy corners are how you make the square and a square. Okay, so to make this little square and a square guy, we first take one of our 4.5-inch fabric A squares, and this is when these little blue squares come in. You put your right side down on one of your corners. Now, because this piece of patchwork, this blue square, is 2.5 by 2.5 inches, it's kind of too big to guess. What we're doing is we're going to sew a seam from this corner to this corner. We're going to go from here to here and then flip this back, right? I could try to just eyeball that on my machine, but I think if you're starting out, you should probably draw a line and lay it just at your 45-degree angle there from point to point. on your patchwork. And then get a marking pencil. This is a chalk pencil and it's white. I really like it. It washes out really easy. It can even like sort of pat off. And I'm going to draw myself a line with this white chalk, really light, from point to point. That's my sewing line. That's what I'm going to sew on. Simple as that, okay? Let's take it over to the sewing machine. It's so nice when you have a sewing line. It's like I don't always draw the lines if I think I can fudge it. But the thing is that I don't know why I don't always draw lines. Well, because it takes a little time. But it's so nice just to have that line right in front of me. I'm just sewing on that line. With my lovely baby lock, I just hit the button and it cuts the thread off for me. I love mentioning that because it's so great. I'm going to press this now, set my seam, and I'm going to open this up just like that. It's a little like a flying goose unit at this point. You may recognize it from other episodes or other patchwork that you've done. Then you want to trim off the back side, right? Grab my scissors. I'm in love with all my tools, my little Hovel scissors that I love so much. They're so sharp, they never really need sharpening. This is garbage, goes into your wastebasket. And that's one side of your flippy corner. Let's bring it over here to show you. That's one side of your flippy corner. You do the same thing right there. And the same thing right there. And the same thing right there. I would recommend that the second flippy corner you do is the one directly across from the one you just sewed, because that way you don't get in your own way with your little flippy corners. I would sew this one, draw your line from here to here. And one thing you'll do, if you decide you don't want to draw lines, you'll probably do this more often or do it a couple times. I mean, I've done it. I'll sew from here to here. That's wrong. That doesn't give you anything. It just gives you a mistake that you have to pull out or throw away, but it's okay. So there's another line. I would sew on that line, trim, then do my other sides, okay? And once I've done all my sides, I end up with my flippy corner square, which is getting a little bit of chalk dust on it, but that's okay. So let's lay out what we've got. I think what I did is I already joined my rows. That's fine. I can show you the rows. So here's what I have in the rows, right? The rolling stone block rows. I've made my 2 flippy corners for the bottom. I've made my 2 flippy corners for the top. They go in the squares in a square go in all 4 corners, 1, 2, 3, 4. The middle is that 5th piece of 4.5 by 5. You cut 5 of these pieces, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4. The 5th one goes in the middle. And these strip set pieces that you had made before and cut, the 4.5 by 5 pieces that you cut out of your strip sets, that's what this is, right? They go in here, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you put those out and join them by the rows like you do on any block, square in a square to strip set piece and your other square in a square. And then you join your middle row together and your final row. And then when you join these together, you're going to have a pretty long seam to sew. I would put in some pins. And then once you've joined all your rows, you have your finished block. That looks a little something like this. And just for fun, I made this block in a couple different fabrics so you could see some of the possibilities. I've done it in our orange. I made it in some forks and spoons. And I also did one with some roosters. And actually, put all together, these look pretty cool together. The oranges and the blues really look nice. So you could do a whole quilt. And it's kind of boyish, like maybe for a nephew or a little brother or something, or a boyfriend. So I hope you learned something. I hope you learned about flippy corners and squares in a square today. And go to the blog to see what I've done with a rolling stone block. And join us next time on Quilty. Quilty is brought to you by APQS, handcrafted quilting machines. Baby lock, for the love of sewing. Hovel, when you need to cut it close, choose Hovels. Quiltology, the urban quilt space.